Welcome to today's Table Talks. My name is Scott Kappelman. I'm joined by my two co-hosts. We've got Tyce Lawbinger in the middle, and we've got Clark McGehee on the end.
That's right.
How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. We had a really good meeting at lunch today.
We did.
It was quick. Love when meetings are productive like that. And quick.
I do too.
Yeah. I'm feeling a little behind in the digital age. I've got my physical copy of my notes in front of me, and I've got my physical Bible, and you guys both have your iPads out, and it just feels like I'm just behind, but it's okay. I'm still feeling good.
Clark, you actually might be the person who's most in touch with God.
That's true.
Oh, there we
You're
go.
not connected with all these electronic devices.
Yeah, that's right. So now I'm just moving Tyce's phone. Get that phone out.
For real.
All right, so we haven't seen each other since Christmas on these times for recordings.
No.
Any updates that we need from over the last 3 or 4 weeks? Because we last recorded in December. We're now in January 2026.
Yeah. I just got back from a Colorado trip.
Had a
and
great time.
We did, yeah. My brother and his wife and my wife went all together, and it was a lot of fun. His little baby went as well, 1-year-old, and we drove. So
Wow.
It was a unique experience, but I mean, he was a great baby. Like, I feel like he cried a few times, but other than that, he was a really good baby. And the trip was awesome. We got a lot of rest in, so.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Tyce,
No, not much.
you've been enjoying being out of seminary.
I've been enjoying being out of seminary for sure. Yep, it's been good. I'm a bachelor again for these next 3 days while Brooklyn's gone, so I'm gonna be by
Oh,
myself.
I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast.
She doesn't listen. She doesn't listen to the podcast. Don't worry. But yeah, my family's doing well. My mom's back in session, so
As
has been busy. Yep,
State representative in
So-
Missouri.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Well, today our topic as we move forward is a new topic that we have not talked about. And maybe in 2026, we will try to have more topics along these lines. We've tried to hit some popular topics that maybe you have been thinking about, but we want to do some biblical topics in 2026. And so the one we're talking about today is, should Christians observe the Sabbath? That's our question for today. Should Christians observe the Sabbath? So do either one of you have a generic definition of the Sabbath?
I've got a very generic definition, actually. This
Give
is
it to
from
us.
the Blue Letter Bible. The actual Hebrew word is Shabbat, and it means very simply to rest from labor.
I like how you're able to pronounce that with your Hebrew.
Yes, thank you, Tyce. Whenever I wrote this, I have my notes in front of me of a seminary paper that I had written. And when I had written this, I had not yet taken Hebrew, and I even wrote it wrong. And I noticed that. So my
Wow.
Hebrew is benefiting our table talks today. Yeah.
Well, I actually went a different direction. I went to the Oxford Online Dictionary, Oxford Languages Dictionary Online. That's what it's called. And in a generic way, Sabbath means a day of religious observance and abstinence from work, kept by Jewish people from Friday evening to Saturday evening, and by most Christians on Sunday. And then the second definition, which I thought y'all would find interesting for Sabbath, was a supposed annual midnight meeting of witches with the devil.
Whoa.
So, as the devil often does, he takes something that God intended for good, and I guess he turns it into something more for his evil works. Here
Okay,
on the earth.
well, I can answer this question of should Christians observe that kind of Sabbath right now?
And the answer is no.
The answer is no, right?
So I thought y'all would get a kick out of that.
That's
but
crazy.
You're correct. So if I understand this right, and y'all are the Hebrew scholars now, and I'm not, Sabbat is the verb, and Shabbat or Sabbat is the noun for the Hebrew. Is that correct? Did you have that in your paper?
I did not, because I had not taken the class yet. So.
Okay. And I had the definition as to stop, the ceasing, or to keep.
Okay, there we go.
So there were multiple expressions of it, but
Well,
they
that's
all
the
kind of
verb
mean the
of it,
same.
right?
Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, so let's talk about the origins of the Sabbath from a biblical perspective. Either one of you want to dive in on that?
Sure, I've got Exodus chapter 20 in front of me.
That's exactly what I had.
There we go. The Ten Commandments, Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 10. But mainly, verse 8 is very succinct. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates." We might as well read verse 11 as well. "For in 6 days The Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
I had the same set of verses that you just read.
There we go.
And
We're
we didn't
just on
even
the
talk
same
about it
wavelength. No, we
before
didn't.
this started today, which is great. So I did have a few notes here for our audience who might be watching and you're not real familiar with this. Obviously, these words that Clark just read for us are from the Mosaic covenant. And as we look at the Old Testament, there were multiple covenants that God issued forth. One is the Edenic covenant, which is back in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a conditional covenant, and the symbols or the signs of the Edenic covenant were the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then you've got the Noahic covenant, and that's an unconditional one, and that's where God, saved Noah and his family. And then following that, he put the rainbow in the sky and said, "I'll never destroy the earth." So it's an unconditional in the form that he's just destroyed it with water. So it's an unconditional covenant. Then you got the Abrahamic covenant, which was both unconditional on God's part, conditional on our part. And the sign of that was circumcision. And then the Mosaic covenant that you've just read from Exodus 20, it's where God gives the law at Mount Sinai. That's a conditional covenant, and its sign is the Sabbath. And then you've got the Davidic covenant, and it's both unconditional on God's part, conditional on David and his descendants' part. And the sign was the eternal throne in Jerusalem. So,
Wow, let's just have you teach an Old Testament class. I mean, look at
I just
that.
thought those were interesting because when we talk about this passage in Exodus 20, a part for me of understanding the importance of the Sabbath is it was a sign of the Mosaic covenant. And I think that's why I wanted to kind of go through that real quick.
Yeah.
Tyce, you studied these covenants?
Oh yeah, through school, through my Old Testament classes.
And I think we may have down through the year this year in our plan to talk about covenants in more detail.
Yeah.
Than what I
Because
just went through.
I do like how you said you made the difference of conditional and unconditional, and some of them are unconditional on God's part, but conditional on ours.
Yes,
And
and I think that's important to keep in mind.
it is.
So, okay, back. Any more thoughts about the origins of the Sabbath? Obviously, you read it, but any
Right.
thoughts about it?
I don't know where we're going to take this exactly today, but I actually have a verse that talks about it being the sign in Exodus
Yeah, give it to
chapter
us.
31, verses 12 and 13 says, "And the Lord said to Moses, you are to speak to the people of Israel and say, above all, you shall keep my Sabbaths, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you." And what I find really interesting about this is it set apart Israel as distinct, as unique. A lot of the Old Testament laws lined up with other kind of Mesopotamian, ancient Eastern cultures' laws. I mean, don't murder, don't steal. Like, it lined up with other laws, but the Sabbath was very unique in the sense of it set Israel apart to say that you're going to have a day of rest. And not only that, but there were years that tie into it, all of these things. And to not get too far into maybe what you have on your notes, I think it creates an avenue for us to be uniquely God's people as well, because we live in a culture today that is so caught up with working and moving all the time, and our society is so just everything go, 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 that to see people who take time to rest really distinctly marks them as believers, I think.
I think you've made a really good point that a lot of the laws that we find in the Mosaic covenant, especially those that we find in Exodus 20, you could find them in other cultures of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But this Sabbath observance was something that was out of the ordinary,
Yeah.
along with the call for them to be holy, I
Yeah.
think was another distinct mark. But in this case, for the Mosaic covenant, the Sabbath was the key to distinguish them from other cultures
Yeah.
in terms of the law.
It's very
I think that's a
interesting.
really good point.
Yeah.
Tosh, you got any thoughts at this
Yeah,
point?
because I think even with what Clark just said about the distinction, I mean, ultimately we all need rest at some point. But if you want to take that further, God commanded that the land had to be rested, or that your animals, what you worked with, had to be rested. And so God really wanted this to be set apart from everyone else, and He's going to go above and beyond with the Sabbath in this Old Testament Mosaic covenant. That, hey, you are not going to do anything that the other people will do during this day. Again, some people do take it too far. You can get pharisaical with it and say, like, I'm not allowed to even take X amount of steps. But God really wanted to say, hey, I don't care what the the foreigners do. I was going to use Gentiles, but that's not until the New Testament. But these pagans do. You're going to hold this at a higher covenant or a higher standard than everyone else.
And don't you find it interesting, and this is not in my notes, this is just a rabbit trail that I want to chase for just a moment, that God did not issue this Mosaic covenant until the people came out of Egyptian slavery.
Yeah.
Because don't you know Pharaoh would have had a fit
Oh, he would have.
if the Mosaic covenant would have been in play and he had these slaves who once a week said, we're not working.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, why? Because our God told us not to. Well, we're not serving that God here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Get back to work. I
Yeah.
mean, it would have been incredible problems and probably a lot of deaths.
He would have.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and you can also think about how during that time, how great it was that he gave it to him while they were at Mount Sinai, because they were still wandering at that point. They hadn't entered the 40 years, but when you're not having to plant gardens every day, or
Yeah.
I mean, you get a lot of practice. That it's not a big deal to rest on every seventh day.
Right.
And so he's giving them some time, like
To
this
get
is what, this is what we're
acclimated
gonna
to
do. You don't have any work to do right now, so just rest on that seventh day. Don't worry about your crops. Don't worry about anything.
Yeah, and as far as the history of it goes, too, it's a picture of God's kindness as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he says to not make those in your family work, to not make your servants work, or like Tyce talked about, your livestock and the ground even. I mean, there was this command of, hey, let everybody take this time to just rest. So it's a really big picture of God's kindness as well.
Which would have been a witness to any aliens who had joined with the
Oh,
nation of
totally.
Israel, whether it was from the time of Mount Sinai to the first trip to the Jordan or the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. If we know that there were outside groups that joined with the Israelites, now they had to profess their covenant allegiance to Yahweh, but that seventh day had to be a witness.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I got like bound to lifetime servanthood to somebody, and they were like, "You get to rest one day of the week," I would say, "Man, what's going on with this? Like, this is a huge witness to this person's God." So yeah, I agree.
And I guess we still see some semblance of that with
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. You were
I
going
was
to talk
just
about
thinking
that.
Yeah, I was just thinking it.
I mean, every time we drive by Chick-fil-A, or anybody drives by Chick-fil-A, whether you're a believer in Jesus or not, you see a sign that said we're closed on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so there is a witness to that.
Isn't that always when you crave it the most too?
Oh,
Just-
absolutely.
Yeah,
I can't
right.
tell you how many times we've come out of church and said, don't you wish Chick-fil-A was open today?
I
And we
know.
go right there and get
No,
some.
I've never said that.
You've never said
What?
that,
I do
Tyce?
not like
Come on.
Chick-fil-A. I don't like it.
Whoa, on the
know.
podcast for everybody to
Blasphemy.
hear.
No.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Repent right now.
I will not.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what were the goals within the Old Testament of the Sabbath. I think you've alluded to one or two, maybe, Clark, and you may have something in your paper that goes into greater detail about this, but obviously God had some things in mind that he wanted to achieve with the Sabbath. Tyce, you got any thoughts on that?
I think I'm gonna hold on what I have in my notes. So if Clark has something in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I've got four things. Actually,
Okay, yeah, give
that,
it to us.
that
I've
kinda
got four as well.
Okay, come on. Let's see how.
I did not steal your paper, by the way.
Right, yeah. So far, it seems. So far, I'm satisfied that I got a good grade on this because I'm right on track with a pastor with many years under his belt. So I have four things that God could intend for the Sabbath to be for the Israelite people, and that is to be a rest, for uniqueness, which we kind of just talked about. It makes
Yes.
them distinct. Kindness and worship. So all of these things the Sabbath are touching on because obviously it's a time to rest. We just talked about how it makes the people of Israel distinct. I just spoke about God's kindness in it as well. But it was also a time for them to worship. And David Baker writes in his book, The Decalogue, that the Sabbath is dedicated to God and so has a religious function. And because the Sabbath is first of all a holy day, and then it is a holiday. So I thought that was a good addition from him, just to recognize that first and foremost, it was a day that they were called to be holy, which involved an act of worship. So
I like that. Mine are similar, but a little bit different. But I think the same guy might have been my consultant that was yours. Now, I didn't get it from the Decalogue, but I think he's also written another book called
Wow.
the Baker Dictionary.
okay.
And he said that one of the goals was the Jews were to acknowledge the 7-day-a-week rhythm that they lived in was a gift from God. It included 6 days of work and a day of rest. And then the second thing is they were to acknowledge they were co-partners with God in the stewardship of creation. It was God's creation. He called them into a partnership to steward that creation. And the way God wanted it to be stewarded was work 6 days, take a day off.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
then the third one was they practiced the Sabbath to be reminded of their identity as God's people, which you kind of talked about a little bit in what you said. And that comes really from Deuteronomy 5. And I'll try to turn there quickly and read this, verses 12 through 15. Because before their release as Egyptian slaves, they were nothing more than slaves. But every time they observed the Sabbath, it took them back to their previous life experience and how God delivered them and gave them a different life going forward. It's kind of like before we met Jesus, we lived in sin and we're in bondage to it. Once we meet Jesus, we live a life of freedom and grace. So again, Deuteronomy 5, 12 through 15 has to do, it's a repeat of the Ten Commandments with a little different flair to it. Be careful to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. Do not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or donkey, any of your livestock, or the resident alien who lives within your city gates, so that your male and female slaves may rest as you do. And then verse 15 is the little bit of difference here. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and that is why the Lord your God has commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So it reminded them where they were and where they are now going because of God's rescue. And then finally, they were to practice the Sabbath to be renewed in the job of God's care and provision. So when they rested, they had to trust God that He would provide and He would care for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a real significant part of it as well. Anything else we want to add on that before we go to the next question I have?
I like your second point about how they were
co-partners with God.
Yeah, because the first time we see the rest is in Genesis 2.
Yes, that's right.
And Clark mentioned it in his verse about how God blessed that day. And so if you read the first few verses of Genesis 2, we see just God resting. And it doesn't come up really again until we see it again at the mountain. And so God at this point is making them his covenant people and saying, you are now you're doing this with me, co-partners with me.
Yeah, that's a really good application of that. He rested in the beginning, but then by the Mosaic covenant, he's saying, I want you to do the same because we're in this together. I didn't have that as a reference point, but I think you made a really good connection there.
And I almost think some of it even ties into us being made in His image too. Yep. That, God rested on the seventh day, and we, being made in His image, are made to take a little bit of rest. So
that's good. All right, so now this brings me to my question, and I may have skipped something you want to talk about, Tyce, and if I do, come back to it. Is the Sabbath mandated in the New Testament?
You didn't skip anything.
Okay, great.
That's what we've got to ask ourselves today, right?
Yeah, that's where we got to go, because we're believers in Jesus. We're not under the Mosaic covenant.
Right.
So how do
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, praise the Lord for that. Exactly. So is it mandated?
I'm going to say no. We don't see Jesus repeat it, and we don't see any of the apostles repeat the command for a Sabbath. We see a lot about rest, but we don't see a command for the Sabbath.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also going to say no. As much as I think it's beneficial to take some type of Sabbath rest, whether it's once a week or not, I mean, I'm not sure. But as much as I think it's beneficial, mandated, I don't think so.
Yeah, I would say no too.
Okay, you had a smile.
I know. I just wanted to see how we'd come out if we'd all be on the same page.
Yeah.
But
you are. We do disagree a little bit. You're a little bit more of an extremist than we are, but
yeah, that's true.
That's right. Okay, so if there's not a practice that serves, if there's not a mandate for the Sabbath in the New Testament, is there a complement, or how should we approach this? And I think there's a complement. And y'all are going to go at it, maybe there's still a need for it. That's my guess, is how we're going to go
That's
about it.
probably my guess too. So
yeah.
Do you want to give your...
Yeah, so I'll start with mine. So I
it.
think there's a complement in the New Testament. It's not mandated. It's not, as you said, Tyce, Jesus didn't say we have to observe the Sabbath, nor did the people who wrote the rest of the books in the New Testament. I think the closest complement we have is abiding in Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I've said that before, and y'all have heard me teach that at a men's Bible study. But John 15, really most of the chapter is about Jesus calling us to abide And I think that abiding is the closest thing we have to rest in the Old Testament. And so that's the direction I would go, that Jesus called us to abide with him. So y'all take it a different direction.
Well, just to confirm what you've said, we see Hebrews 4:3. For we who have believed have entered the rest, as he said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter the rest, although the words were finished from the foundation of the world. And so just the beginning of that really is what was important, is for we who have believed have entered the rest. And so the complement of abiding in Christ, when we believe, we are abiding with Christ, and we are walking in step with him. That's when we enter the rest, for your point.
Right.
And I've got Matthew 11:28, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So I've got kind of a similar picture that you're painting, Pastor Scott, that rest, I think, is something that, like, you could ask most people, and you go, do you get a lot of rest? And they go, oh man, not at all. It just feels like I never get to rest. I'll rest when I'm dead, or like I'm waiting for retirement, because then I'll finally be able to rest. But what Jesus offers is, if you come to me, then I will give you rest. So I think that Jesus is our picture of how we accomplish this rest.
So I'm going to tie that verse, for me, I would tie it to the Mosaic information we studied in Exodus 20.
Mm-hmm.
Because at Mount Sinai, God introduces the Mosaic covenant, which includes a lot of work, to be honest. You've got some laws, and then you've got some things to do, like bring your sacrifice and, treat people this way. And it was a burden to try to honor the Mosaic law, and none of us could ever keep it in its full extent. And as it says in the New Testament, if you break one law, you broke them all. Essentially you're as guilty as breaking them all. And so to me, Jesus, when he says, come to me, it's not going to be about that Mosaic covenant work that always led to condemnation and guilt. You're going to find rest because I'm going to provide my righteousness, and you won't have to worry about that.
Yep.
You can abide with me now.
Because there's this intense intimidation, right? That if we were bound by the law and no other way, I mean, one day of rest in the week wouldn't help me feel rested, because I would know that I'm a sinner before an angry God, And it's like, I mean, I wouldn't feel any more rested just by sitting around on my tail one time a week, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for Jesus to offer the righteousness that you're just talking about, I think that's a great point.
Right.
So my question to you then is, we do find rest in Christ, but we also see Jesus needing to recede at times in his humanity. So if we come to Christ to find our rest, well, then what do we say for Christ, who he had to go somewhere else and find rest himself because of his physical body and just the mental stress. Yeah, that's the word. That
and limitations that we have in our body.
And so it's hard to say, well, all we got to do is abide in Christ and we're good, because Christ gave an example too of needing to rest.
I think that's a great point.
It is. And that was actually why I said that a minute ago about us being made in his image. Actually is ingrained in us that we have a need to rest. I think even it has a slight hold on unbelievers, even despite what I just said about, me not being able to rest if I was a sinner. I mean, there's still an aspect that God commands all things to rest, livestock, all those types of things too. So there's this whole something within us, I think, that desires this rest.
I agree. I mean, I think you both make an incredible point that Jesus, who's God in the flesh,
right,
had to withdraw at times to be by himself, to be with the Father, to get rest. He took a nap in the bottom of a boat once while a storm was just raging around the entire disciples, and he was well asleep because it didn't bother him.
Yeah.
So I think you make an incredible point.
So what do we do, Tyce? Do we really seek out rest? Do we have to take a weekly Sabbath? What's the answer? I
would go with, we don't have to seek out weekly rest. We don't have to seek out a Sabbath, but we need to seek out intentional rest when we do rest. And I don't know, I don't want to skip any points. So my question to you all is, I would ask first, what do you think worldly rest is? And then what do we think intentional rest is compared to worldly rest?
That's a good question.
I think I'm trying to think back to myself of when I've had times of quote unquote rest, but I've walked away feeling less rested. And I can think of a few things. For one, I rest with a lot of distractions in mind. So it can be I'm quote unquote resting, but I have my phone in my hand and I'm scrolling on some kind of Facebook or whatever. Or it could be too that I'm trying to rest, but all I can do is think about everything that is going to come up in the upcoming week. And I want to say, oh man, I'm really going to rest. But also I need to get this done. I need to get this done. And then my mind starts going and I start writing things down on my notebook of things that need to get done that I'm not going to do now because I'm resting, but it still needs to get done. And turns out I've been working this whole time. Yeah, exactly. So those are two examples I would say of what a worldly rest would look like.
Okay.
You got thoughts? No, I don't. I'm trying to think through how you went about that.
Yeah, no. So I was just thinking like, so maybe some worldly rest might be, hey, I'm going to come home every day from lunch and I'm going to turn on the TV and watch something. Or like my rest is, I don't know, going out, distracting myself at a football game or at a soccer game or at a baseball game, something like that. But then I like Clark's point about how when we're resting, sometimes we have our minds just turning, thinking about other things. And so I would say Christian rest is finding time, but with Christ, where we're abiding. But like this time alone is for either me to build my relationship with God or me to reflect on what God has done in my relationship. And now I don't know the best way to describe this. So I think being outside is great because you can reflect on God's creation, but being outside of the football game, maybe not so great because now you're not reflecting on God in this moment. You're reflecting on the world in that moment. And so you've got to be conscious about what you're reflecting on, or are you growing a relationship during that time of rest?
So you're saying worldly rest may or may not have a dynamic that pulls you into a closer union with Christ, but spiritual rest always has some component of going deeper with Him, abiding in Him, finding peace in Him.
Yeah, and don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you can only have rest if you're in a quiet time, because God has created us to have fellowship with believers. God has created us to have relationships, and so rest might be deepening those relationships, but something that's not of the world, I would say.
And then I like what I don't, but I have a quote.
Okay.
I like what Baker also adds to this conversation. He says, human beings are not beasts of burden, and the Sabbath is not for the purpose of making us work more efficiently. I think of Henry Ford, right? Or maybe it wasn't Henry Ford. Maybe I'm getting my history mixed up, but the first person that came up with the idea of 5 days and then 2 days on the weekend, right? You guys know what I'm talking about?
I didn't know Henry Ford was involved in that, but I knew
well, that's
somebody
what I'm
along
saying. Maybe
the way.
it wasn't.
I can't
don't
remember
know.
who it was.
Okay, well, whoever that is, don't trust me on my history like ever. But whoever that was, Sarava, was Henry Ford? Oh wow, okay, it's behind the camera. Sarava's helping me out. Anyway, he did it so he would have more efficient workers. But I don't think that's the picture that we get from God. Talking about when He does rest in Genesis chapter 2. He says in verse 2, on the seventh day, God finished His work that He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work that He had done. And it's not telling us God rested because, Adam and Eve were about to sin and God was preparing Himself for that future work ahead. Instead, it was more along the lines of enjoying the fruit of the labor that you've already done. So I think when we rest, it's such a good time for us to connect with God, to look back at what He has done throughout this time of us working, to say, man, I'm really going to enjoy the fruit of the labor that I have been doing. I'm so grateful even that God has allowed me to be able to do all these things and that He's worked all this out, rather than what I usually tend to do, which is to not think about what is in the past, but to rest, to prepare for the future, as if I was a beast of burden, to use the word I said a second ago.
Do you think we get hung up on the word finished? That He finished His work? And that we don't ever have a sense of finishing?
Ooh.
That was a good question.
That's like philosophical, Pastor Chad. I'm not sure.
As you were reading the verse and just reflecting on what you had to say, it just came to mind that our culture is driven by what's ahead, not what's behind. And so I don't know if we ever give ourselves the latitude to say, I finished something.
Yeah.
And as a result, we can't rest because we're thinking about still what's ahead. It's just a question to ponder.
No, that's actually so good, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because I just think of like woodworking, and I finish a project. And I know Clark can relate because he does it too. You finish a project, and you might enjoy it for every bit of 10 minutes, and then you're thinking of the next thing. Like, you build a coffee table, well, what will complement this coffee table?
Or, I mean, I'm so bad. When I'm on vacation, I start thinking about planning the next vacation. Like, I really do. And I'm just like, what's wrong with us? You know, why can't we just enjoy the rest that we have?
I was thinking about on Sunday afternoons, I rewatched the sermon that I've just preached to critique myself. But by Sunday night, when I finished watching that, I'm already preparing the first steps of the next sermon. I don't even take Sunday night before I'm already.
That's okay. You're a pastor. You don't get the Sunday rest.
Yeah.
Well,
we work those days.
I'm a 1 day worker and a 6 day slacker.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I think this actually gets into some theological conversations too, because we, in our Western minds, look at retirement as the time when we've finished. Yeah. So I will finally have finished my work when I retire, and I hear people all the time equate like heaven ultimately one day with retirement, and Scripture makes it clear that we have work to do in the new earth.
Absolutely,
we're going to be working the ground. It's not going to be toilsome and hard, but I mean, like, we have work that is going to need to be done. But for us, like in our Western mind, it's like, oh, finally I'll get to sit on a cloud and read a book or something, But that's that's not what God intended. Maybe we'll sit on a cloud and read a book once a week. I don't know. I don't know how the new earth will work exactly like that. But
yeah, I had a coach one time. Thinking of that, I had a coach one time. We were all complaining about how much we were running, and just like we were hot, we were done. And he's like, I was shocked that he used a Bible reference, but he's like, do you think God made sweat glands after the fall? He's like, no, you're supposed to work beforehand. Like, sweat glands were invented before. You're going to work now. It's good for you.
That's good.
I was like, well, can't really argue
that.
He did humble us, because I was like, you know what? God did create sweat glands beforehand, and work is good.
There we go.
Well, I think this has been a very productive discussion.
I think we all three have a little bit different view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I've shared with you guys, it's hard for me to stop.
It is. You are more of I have a verse, Revelation 14, 12 and 13.
Is that of the beast?
No. It says, hear the call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commands of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. For now on, blessed indeed for the spirit, they may rest from their labors and the deeds that have followed them. And just say, you're done. You died, now you're done. You're good.
So are you wishing death on me?
No. I'm just saying.
No, that was nice.
That was good. No, I appreciate that, Tyce. Yeah,
but I just think, like, I use that verse because I've used a verse, Clark's used a verse, you have verses. I think you can find all three viewpoints. Yeah, and I think it's truly, you have to find your rest with Christ, whatever that may be. Whether it's fellowship is my rest, or alone time with Christ is my rest, or doing my work for my job is my rest because I know I'm glorifying God, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And those verses support it all.
That's good. Well, we've gone over 30 minutes, and we were trying to stay on a 30-minute target.
Yeah, we thought this was going to be a 20-minute one when we started.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, well.
But obviously, we've had some good discussion. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and it'll give you some things to talk about maybe in your Bible study group, or perhaps even among a group of friends. We hope you will figure out what your Sabbath rest is going to look like, and do it to honor God. That's the main thing, is to honor God and to abide with Jesus as you do this. And so I hope this will be an encouragement to you. We would love for you to share this with other people, give us good ratings and reviews if possible, and then please do come back and join us for the next Table Talks. We hope you have a great week.